My name is Dallas Davis, and I'm a geoscientist or geologist by background, but I have worked in many companies and government for 9 years, and much of the time we were reviewing our mining royalty and tax structure in the province of New Brunswick and participated in federal provincial taxation reviews. A bit of background about me. I was the Chief of Planning Officer for Non-Renewable Resources in the Department of Natural Resources in New Brunswick, and I was with a company called Falcon Bridge for 7 years altogether as a geologist, both down in the green and doing exploration since 1981. I have been doing consulting for both companies and government. I'll start by talking about the sale of mineral properties or mineral licenses, exploration or mining licenses, and what the approach is generally in Canada. The buyer and the seller don't always want the same thing, so they have to first come to agreement on what they wish to get out of the sale or purchase of a property. Does the buyer want full control? And the next question, does the buyer want to share, or the seller want to share the risk and retain some ownership, in the case of the seller, through either a joint venture or what we call an earning? Or perhaps the buyer doesn't know very much about the mining industry or how to evaluate mineral projects, and he may just want to make a small investment or have a toehold, as we might use the term, with an option to increase the ownership if it turns out the one that starts with access to a resource through right to production share or streaming. That may be a company that has a smelter or refinery, or a trading company that wants to have all the product shipped to it. And the next one, right of first refusal to provide project financing, might be a bank or some financial organization. Those are the types of sale or acquisition, joint ventures, acquisitions of existing mining properties, or outstanding shares of the company, or newly issued shares, or acquisition of the company itself, or acquisition of the assets instead of the company. The choice between buying assets, such as the mining license or the mining exploration license of the company, or buying shares of the company is the main choice of the buyer, whether to buy the company or buy the assets from. The seller will generally prefer to sell the assets because the seller may own other assets that they don't want to sell. Where all of the assets of the company are being sold, the parties may prefer a share sale because it's simpler. They just buy all the shares of the company or some proportion. And normally, or they should, have a valuation report done by an independent consultant who's qualified to value the mining. And my last assignment here was with the Australian Gold Extractive Projects to assist in drafting a model for consideration for setting the rules that a code could be used in Mongolia for valuation of minerals. And the third one refers to private companies. If a private company owns the mineral deposit or the mineral license, private companies are quite opaque often and very difficult to find all the information, even by a qualified valuer. So if it's a public listed company on a stock exchange, there's information there. But if it's a private company selling a property, buyers, they don't generally want to purchase shares in the private company. So you can see that the mining deals or sales can be quite complex, and I suppose from a Ministry of Finance point of view, difficult to decide how to tax. In the case of Canada, we tax the capital gain on the sale of the assets or the shares. Most Canadian companies would prefer to sell shares, or all the shares, or some of the shares of their company, because it's easier to establish what the capital gain would be than it is with respect to selling assets, individual assets, or some assets. The shares will have a certain value on the stock market when the seller originally purchased the asset, and the shares will have gone up to a certain value what's going to happen. And then if the seller decided to sell the property to another party, they will sell at maybe a higher price or a lower price. If it's a lower price, the seller has a capital loss. And if the company shares of the company that are actively traded, the market will have set the value at both the time when the seller acquired the property and when the seller sold the property. So that's easy to establish the capital gain. But if it's and you don't have to have a valuation report. But if you're selling assets, if the seller or buying assets, both the buyer and the seller may want to have a valuation report done because they will argue some purchasers may want to purchase the assets of the corporation, but if they're acquired at a certain value that is higher than the original value because maybe they added a resource by drilling or increased the value, that the buyer will also be buying that asset, which is, from a government point of view, for assessing taxation, will have a higher capital cost, and so they will be able to depreciate that value on their own books. If companies have an operating mine and an ongoing mining business, a true real mining business, and they are listed on a stock exchange, usually the takeover or acquisition is by purchase of shares from that company by offering the shareholders a certain amount, and the shareholders accept it. But sale of an undeveloped resource that's not being mined, or a greenfield property that very little is known about, it's almost always by spending money on the property and paying option fees over time. This looks complicated, but it's really not. It's what a typical sale agreement of a mineral exploration property or greenfield property looks like. In this case, the company Rockcliffe Resources purchased property that had a few million tons of known resource of zinc and copper from a company called Pure Nickel, which was my client in 2008. So initially, Rockcliffe had to pay $30,000 on signing the agreement, and each year $30,000 cash to Pure Nickel. And Rockcliffe gave Pure Nickel the right, or warrants the right to purchase 1.25 million shares of Rockcliffe at $1.50 a share anytime within 2 years. If you look up to $1.50 a share, somebody will purchase it. Both companies are listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange. So by spending money, Rockcliffe could earn, they could earn 50% ownership by drilling at least 2,000 meters in the first year and spending a total of $2 million within 2 years. Rockcliffe, after spending that $2 million, and after the second year, could decide that they wanted to form a 50-50 joint venture where Pure Nickel would spend 50% of the money and they would spend 50% of ongoing investment studies. Pure Nickel decided not to contribute spending in a 50-50 joint venture, so Rockcliffe, under the agreement, had the right then to earn another 20% by spending another $2 million over. And Rockcliffe did spend that additional money, and by 2015, both of them, Rockcliffe and Pure Nickel, decided that they couldn't really justify even carrying out a feasibility study, but they had found some more ore, and another company thought that it would have a better chance. So they both sold their interest, and Pure Nickel sold its 30% for $1 million now, or then, and plus $500,000 whenever the project would come into fruition. And Rockcliffe decided that they didn't really need as much money up front, so they accepted $250,000 plus 1.5% of the net smelter return. That's what NSR of their sales value net to the mine when production starts,
and a commitment of 500,000 drilling immediately, and a feasibility study by September 2016. I noticed the press release recently from Rockcliffe, and they said that the feasibility study will be complete by the end of 2017, and they're very optimistic. But as you notice, they must have given extended the agreement. Now, the only money of any significance in this deal is the $1 million paid to Pure Nickel for its 30%. So, would they have paid any income tax on that $1 million? No. These are both just exploration stage companies. They are raising money by selling shares to spend money that they spend evaluating projects. So both Pure Nickel and Rockcliffe have no income other than that, but they have a large amount of losses. Just to show you, Pure Nickel's balance sheet for 3 years. In 2016, November 30th, they had a deficit of $54,803,268, which is what they had spent over the years on mineral projects. And so they had no income, but they occasionally get some money back. A feature of the Canadian mining tax system that is unique, or the Canadian Income Tax Act or law that is unique to Canada, is that you can carry forward indefinitely the losses. So that someday somebody finds a major mineral deposit by the time that the deficit of, say, Pure Nickel was 100 million, that 100 million would be part of the capital asset that could, it's depreciated. They cannot carry forward. They can't they can't increase it by adding interest. No. There are other kinds of businesses and individuals most of them can only carry forward losses for 7 years. So mining can carry forward losses, and that's because there are some of the mining companies actually never succeed. They don't find a mine, but there are 1,200 or 1,400 listed mining companies on the stock exchange, and close to 1,000 are actually just exploration companies. They never have earnings until they become successful in discovery. They could issue more shares under an arrangement under the mining or under the Income Tax Act, which is a unique feature for mining. They can issue some more shares, and in order to make it attractive to investors, they can transfer the right for the investor to an investor may have a high income and need tax deductions to show a low taxable income. So if they have spent or agree to spend in the next 18 months whatever you gave them to purchase some more shares, they can transfer that deduction that they can't use. That I've described what a typical sale is for a property that needs a lot of further exploration. But if it was a property that had mineral resources, and the definition of mineral resource is that you have not done enough, or it is a tonnage of rock that you haven't done enough drilling to make a decision as to whether it's economic, but it might be economic at some time in the future if you did more drilling. So it really only has a notional or anticipated value, but very difficult to exactly say what the value is. Now, if it has what we call a mineral reserve, then it has had enough drilling, it's had enough study, it has to have had a feasibility study completed, and the feasibility study has to show that at the time it's economic. In Mongolia, the government publishes newly registered mineral resources each year. An example is on the next page in the annual report of the Mineral Resources and Petroleum Authority. I think the resources are certified or calculated by the Professional Mineral Council. And I understand that most cases of people selling or companies selling mineral properties or mineral licenses in Mongolia, it's not the kind of earning deal, but usually it is sold for what they consider to be the value of it in cash. Now that property that Pure Nickel sold had a resource, but it's so far not proving to be a reserve. My next slide shows the newly registered hard rock gold deposit resources in tons, the annual report in 2016. Okay, so there's 33.2 tons of gold resources that are found. That probably in several occurrences. And in 1 year, it was 2014, it was 95. And I wonder whether some people who sell their properties own some of those resources, and whether the buyer thinks that that is a definite number, because sometimes it will not turn out to be correct. So I wonder whether government really should be calculating resources and reserves and certifying that this is what we have, rather than just accepting what the industry says it has and letting them sort it out. In Canada, none of the governments do their own calculation on the reserves and the resources, but some of the governments require a feasibility study before they will issue a mining license. They also require completion of the satisfactory impact assessment and compliance with the recommendations of the environmental impact assessment. The feasibility study has to be done by a team of reputable and qualified persons as they're defined under the legislation in Canada, but they must have the certification of a professional association that is set up under government law. But we don't separately, the government doesn't calculate the different, or try to calculate a reserve or certify a reserve, because you think that's dangerous, because it's still, we're not operating experts, the people that do feasibility studies for operating mines. This is just some statistics. The mining and exploration companies that are listed and who they're financing through the Toronto Stock Exchange or the Toronto Venture Exchange. The Toronto Stock Exchange has companies that are actually have mines. The Venture Exchange is what the firm is. It's a risk exchange. 57% of the world's global mine financing is done on the venture exchanges, the Toronto Stock Exchange. 64 billion mining shares were traded in 2016 with a total value of 189 billion. That means just traded, that is, and the rest of that is just there for public relations. These are the statistics. The number of companies that are listed on the Venture Exchange is 989, and the number of companies listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange is 225. Those are just the mining companies. There are other kinds of companies. And the quoted market value of all of the shares is 21.4 billion in the case of the venture companies and 271 billion in the case of the other mining companies. 39 new companies were listed on the Venture Exchange so far this year, up until September 30th, and 2.6 or 2.583 billion was raised by the venture companies, and slightly over 3 billion by the more major mining companies. And I think there's a few of those companies that are, at least the venture companies, that are spending money in Mongolia. There's Erdene, I think it's one, Erdene Resources, which has a whole project. There's a company called Erdene Resources, which has a gold property in southwest, and they're one of the venture exchange companies that I think raised some money this year. All of the names of mining companies and how much money they have raised and everything by clicking on the upper link and the various listing requirements that there are. And also, you probably possibly heard of something called National Instrument 43101. It is issued under securities legislation in Canada. Each province owns the mineral resources within its territory. The federal government doesn't own the mineral resources except offshore or within national parks or military bases. So the provinces have a list of all companies and their addresses, all companies which hold mineral claims or mineral properties. The Canadian government doesn't charge royalties. Only the provinces charge royalties on those, and they're collected either by their mines departments or their Ministry of Finance, depending on what the legislation says.